Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for.
All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Good to be back. I do want to stay on the college football stuff, and I do want to talk about one of our favorite topics, but with a new twist. So the topic is the college football coaching carousel, which obviously this time of year we talk about quite a bit, especially over the last couple of years as the firings have come earlier and earlier, leading to more and more speculation. Of course, over the last couple of days, most of the focus has been on the Auburn Tigers. We know Bryan Harsin was fired about 10 or so days ago, give or take. And really since then, it's been really just talking about all of the things that have happened since. Bryan Harsin's comments on the way out. Lane Kiffin's comments on why he thinks they should hire Deion Sanders. Hugh Freeze after he beat Arkansas, whether he is the favorite or not. So we've done a ton of Auburn over the last couple of days. But I do find it interesting that the other, I would say, marquee coaching job that is really open, at least historically, it's been really, really quiet, hasn't it? Right? Think about Nebraska. Nebraska fires Scott Frost in early September, mid-September. Remember, they could have waited till October 1 and saved $7.5 million. And they said, you are so bad. You are bringing us down so hard. We got to get rid of you right now in the middle of September. But since that firing, it really has been pretty quiet from the Nebraska home front, which is kind of ironic because the AD, Trev Alberts, said, look, you're going to hear a lot of names. Some of them will be true. Some of them won't be, but don't believe everything that you've heard. Yet with that said, it feels like it's been very quiet. But the good news, the reason I'm talking about it today is because it appears as though we do have a little bit of an update from one of the most well-respected college football reporters on the planet. The other day, I saw this. Bruce Feldman works for Fox Sports. Obviously, the Big Noon Kickoff show was asked about these coaching jobs, and Bruce Feldman did put out 4 names that he believes Nebraska has zeroed in on. Now, a couple of them I believe, a couple of them I don't, but let's get into who the 4 names are. As Bruce Feldman on TV, Big Fox, said that he believes that the Nebraska job is essentially down to 4 guys. Former Carolina Panthers head coach and Baylor head coach Matt Rhule, current Army head coach Jeff Monken. Who else? We got offensive coordinator at Alabama, Bill O'Brien, and we have Gary Patterson, the former TCU head coach. And so what I would say is what I just said a second ago. Some of those names I believe, some of them I believe are being leaked to try to create interest that isn't really there. So let's talk about those 4, what I believe is serious, what isn't, and also who could be in the mix here down the road. First of all, Matt Rhule, listen, this is to me the no doubt about it of all no doubt about it. The day Scott Frost was fired, I said I would sit there and wait to see what happens in Carolina because if he gets let go, that's my number 1 choice, no doubt about it. And of course, when I said that, he was still the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Well, a few weeks ago, he got let go by Carolina in the midst of just a terrible, terrible, terrible season. But what I think happened is that lost in him struggling as an NFL head coach, this guy was a really good college coach, and there was a reason that he was so coveted as an NFL head coach. And I'll be honest, I think Matt Rhule struggling in the NFL speaks more to the fact that if you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, it doesn't really matter. And so I think he never got the quarterback right. It happens, but now it is realistic for him to come back to college, and he's going to have a ton of options. But I think for Nebraska, he is the best option. Again, because he struggled in the NFL, everybody's going to sit there and say, oh, he's not that good. No, as a college coach, he's awesome. Let's quickly go through his resume in case you forgot. First head coaching job, Temple. Gets there, year 1, 1-11. By year 3, wins 10 games. By year 4, wins 10 games as well. That is at Temple, a terrible, terrible, terrible football school that has basically struggled largely since he left. Then he goes to Baylor. And I'll be blunt. When he went to Baylor, I said, I don't know, Northeast guy, Penn State background, coached with the Giants, coached at Temple. I don't think this guy's going to fit at Baylor. And keep in mind at the time, Baylor was coming off that crazy scandal involving Art Briles, all sorts of stuff. Sexual assault allegations, quite a few on that roster. There were animal abuse allegations. I mean, you go down the list, everything that could go wrong at Baylor, every impropriety that you could have basically happened at Baylor. That was the mess that he walked into. And within 3 years, he had him playing to go to the college football playoff. Year 1, 1-11. By year 3, they finished 11-3, but keep in mind, they were 11-1 to end the regular season, played in the Big 12 championship game. If they won the Big 12 title game, they were going to the college football playoff. So don't tell me that this guy can't rebuild Nebraska if he could rebuild Baylor in 3 years. And as I've said before, I think in the NIL world, he'd be great. He is a program builder. I thought he did a great job at Baylor. He had no background in the area and put together a plan to have success there. And it worked really well at Baylor. Last thought on Matt Rhule. I would say this about Matt Rhule. Keep in mind, last year, Baylor won a Big 12 title with most of his players, most of his guys that were recruited by him, many of them currently in the NFL. Tyquan Thornton, JT Woods, safety over there. Tyquan Thornton's a wide receiver. Abraham Smith, a running back. Those guys were all recruited by Matt Rhule, or at least most of them were. And guess what? As a lot of them have left, have you seen what's going on at Baylor? They're struggling this year with the guys largely that were recruited by Dave Aranda. So I don't want to discredit Dave Aranda for coaching those guys up, but Matt Rhule left the cupboard full, left a Big 12 championship roster in place for Dave Aranda. Now, the only holdup with Matt Rhule as far as being a Nebraska candidate is two things. One, at the college level, he's going to have options. He's obviously a guy that Auburn will pursue. Now, to be blunt, it feels like to me, he's more Northeast and Midwest than he is Southeast portion of the country. Obviously, like I said, was at Temple, Penn State background, New York Giants before he went to the NFL, goes to Baylor, Northeast, Midwest, Southwest, Southeast. I don't know if he's ready to get, I don't know if he's the right fit for Auburn. Let me put it that way. And I'll say this. I don't know if you have great options if Auburn is the one that you want. By the way, you know what Matt Rhule's best option might be? He's got a $40 million buyout from the Carolina Panthers that they owe to him as part of his contract. And so it might just, he just might say, you know what? I looked it over. I looked Auburn over. No, thank you. I looked Nebraska over. No, thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and sit this season out and see what's available a year from now. Don't know him. Don't know what his interests are. But I would say if it comes down to Nebraska and Auburn, and he wants to get back to coaching, it does feel like Nebraska is probably the one that makes more sense. And if I'm Trev Alberts, I'm doing whatever I can to try to convince him to take the Nebraska job. Some of the other candidates, Jeff Monken, it's interesting. I actually heard Jeff Monken's name early on in the process, and I kind of shooed it away and said, I don't really think this is going to happen. Well, fast forward, and it appears as though he's very much in the mix. So credit to the person that told me that, discredit to me, shame on you, slap on the wrist for not listening to the people that are telling you these things. People that don't know much about Jeff Monken's background, really successful at Army. And I think you can legitimately argue that Army is maybe the toughest job in college football. I don't know. But how about this? The last 4 years prior to this season, 10 wins in 2017, 11 wins in 2018, 9 wins in 2020, the COVID year, 9 wins in 2021. So 4 of the last 5 complete seasons, Jeff Monken has had Army with at least 9 wins. Sorry, I tripped over my own words there. Has gotten at least 9 wins at Army. That is really impressive. By the way, 4 of the last 5 years played in bowl games, 4-1 in those bowl games. Interesting candidate, obviously had success at the FCS level at Georgia Southern. Now, Georgia Southern is now an FBS program. They were an FCS team at the time. Multiple deep runs in the FCS playoff. Now, as far as his candidacy, I think there's some positives and negatives. One, if you can build an Army, you can build it anywhere. But where the concern would come in for me is kind of multifold. One, he's never coached at the Power 5 level. Nebraska's a big boy job. But 2, more importantly, the triple option stuff would scare me. Obviously, for people who don't know, Army runs the triple option, okay? And so what would scare me is a few things. Now, I do think for some Nebraska fans, going back to the option, they would probably like that. That was obviously, for people who don't remember, that was where they had their highest levels of success in the 80s and 90s. But my thought on the triple option is, or the option, I should say, maybe not the triple option, is that while I think it would appease a certain part of the Nebraska fan base, two, I think there's a lot of people that are like, that feels like kind of 25, 30 years ago, going back to the future there. Beyond that, what would really scare me, and we've seen this at Georgia Tech the last couple of years, once you commit to going to the triple option, it's like a 10-year process if you ever want to get back. And what I mean by that is you go, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to really get the personnel you need to run that system. Even Jeff Monken went 4-8, 2-10 his first 2 years. But it's going to take 3 or 4 years to get the personnel that you need. You hope you can start winning. But if you ever have to fire the guy, it's another 3, 4, 5 years to get back to getting the personnel that you need to run more traditional stuff. Look at Georgia Tech. They were largely successful under Paul Johnson. They tried to transition out of the triple option. It's been a disaster. They just had to fire their head coach. He was there for 4 years, and they still weren't looking like an FBS Power 5 football program. So that's where the concern comes into me. I don't love the idea of going to the option. I would also say optically, and I'll put this to Nebraska fans. You guys and girls tell me. I think it kind of looks like you feel like as Nebraska that you need a gimmick to succeed, right? Like you're basically saying we can't beat Ohio State playing Ohio State football. We can't beat Michigan playing Michigan football. So we got to go do something completely different. I don't know that I feel that way about Nebraska. I've talked about this a lot with Nebraska. I think in a 12-team playoff world, there is a world that Nebraska can build the third best team in the Big Ten and make the playoff on a regular basis. I don't think you need to go gimmick. I don't think you need to go 1940s. I don't think you need to go triple option. I just don't love it. Be curious how far down the road they are with Jeff Monken. The other thing is he's 3-5 this year. They do close over the next couple weeks with a couple more games. They do play my UConn Huskies here coming up. But this is a team that is currently sitting at 3-5 overall. Still have Troy, UConn, UMass, and Navy. That's the other part of it too. I know he's been good. Probably pretty tough to sell a coach coming off a 6-6, 5-7 type season to your fan base. Last two candidates. First of all, Bill O'Brien. I'm sorry. I just don't buy this one. I trust Bruce. I trust his reporting. He's great at what he does. But a couple things stand out here. One, let me just put it this way. I don't buy it. Okay. Sometimes, and I think we all know this, but we have to remember it, is that agents, are the guys that kind of run these searches along with search firms. And agents do a really good job of making sure that their candidates get their names out there. And I think this feels more like an agent push than anything else. Remember last year, Bill O'Brien's name was quote unquote linked to every job in college football. LSU, USC, Florida, Oklahoma. Go back and look at those coaching search lists. Bill O'Brien was on all of them. I don't think he even got an interview for any of them. I don't think there's a market for Bill O'Brien. I think this is his agent trying to create a market. Now, I would say I think there's one school that maybe would have interest in him. That's Georgia Tech. He was a longtime assistant there. But outside of that, this feels like an agent trying to create a market. This is a guy that, and I get it, Midwest, coached at in the Big Ten at Penn State. I don't buy this at all. This just feels like something that's being created for a media storm, created to try to get his name out there. I mean, all you got to do is turn on the tape of Alabama. Alabama's having its worst season literally in a decade, regular season. First time since they've lost 2 games in 2010, and a big part of since 2010, and a big part of it, let me rephrase that. First time since 2010 they've lost 2 games pre-Thanksgiving, because I know some people are going to get on my butt about that. First time they've lost 2 games since 2010 before Thanksgiving. It's the offense. It's a complete mess. Nick Saban's going to try to force him out at the end of the season. And so I just look at this Bill O'Brien thing. I don't really buy it. The Georgia Tech thing is something I do buy because, again, he was a longtime assistant there. Don't really see it. Don't really buy Bill O'Brien as the head coach. And I'd finally say, like, Gary Patterson's another one. I don't really see it. You look at Gary Patterson, listen, I get the resume, built TCU, Texas ties. You got to recruit Texas to have success at Nebraska, program builder. And if Nebraska just said, like, look, we're going to hire this guy for 4 or 5 years, have him help us reestablish everything and then pass it off to somebody else, okay, that I could buy. But to me, Gary Patterson feels like a scorned lover. Feels like you could even see some of his comments in the lead up to his firing, as well as his firing last year at TCU, basically saying, like, I don't need to change. I don't think. And then when he gets fired, like feels like it's this complete outrage. It's like, no, dude, I get that you've been there 20 years. I get that you led the team to some really successful seasons, but this is a results-oriented business, and you're not getting the job done the last couple of years. Gary Patterson's last 4 years, here's what they are: 7-6, 5-7 during the COVID year, 6-4, 3-5 before he got fired last year. And then, oh, by the way, remember, all his players are now in position as I record here on Tuesday night before the playoff poll to potentially make the college football playoff. So don't tell me that he was wrongly fired and he just needs another chance. And I guess that would be my concern. Is this scorned Gary Patterson that wants to prove people wrong because he feels like he was wronged? Or is this Gary Patterson that really in a year away has learned something and is ready to help rebuild the football program? I thought it was interesting, even in Bruce Feldman's comments about Gary Patterson, this is his exact quote. He said, Nebraska has to wonder how confident would they be that they're getting a Gary Patterson 2.0 if they took a chance on him. In other words, has he actually evolved, or is it going to be the same guy that was basically 500 over his last 4 years at Nebraska? So those are the 4 candidates. I definitely buy Rhule. I don't really get Monken. I don't buy Bill O'Brien at all. I sort of get Gary Patterson. The one variable I would say here as well, there's going to be other candidates, but then also, I just think you have to consider that there's names that we don't know that could be in the mix. Nobody was talking about Brian Kelly for LSU at this point last year. Nobody was talking about Lincoln Riley for USC at this point this time last year. So keep in mind all of that. Somebody is going to be interested. Somebody is going to emerge. And I think there are going to be other names outside of it. But I'll say this: if Matt Rhule is available, go get yourself a little bit of Matt Rhule.